Layla had always believed in fairy tales, not the kind written in children's books, but the ones where love was supposed to conquer all, where two people found each other in the chaos of the world and built something so pure that everyone admired them. In the heart of Kano, she met Omar, a young businessman with ambition in his eyes and gentleness in his smile. Their love story had blossomed quickly, yet sincerely, and when they married 5 years ago, it felt as though destiny itself had signed their union. The day of their wedding was still clear in Layla's memory. The sun had risen with a brilliance that seemed to bless their union. The hall was decorated in gold and cream, with roses climbing every corner and chandeliers glistening above them. Guests whispered about how perfect they looked. Omar in his traditional cream-colored kaftan, tall and commanding, his neatly trimmed beard giving him an air of quiet strength. Layla, in her lace gown with a ghillie wrapped elegantly, her dark skin glowing under the lights, looked like royalty. Mashallah, the women chorused as she walked in, escorted by her father. She had been radiant, smiling so widely her cheeks hurt. That was the beginning everyone saw, and for years it seemed to continue. Omar was caring, attentive, and protective. He was the type of husband who held her hand in crowded markets, who noticed when she was tired, who cooked her jollof rice on days she didn't feel like leaving the bed. He would kiss her forehead after prayer and tell her, "You're my biggest blessing, Layla." She believed him deeply. They built their lives together, buying a modest but beautiful house with bougainvillea climbing its walls, filling it with laughter and prayer. Friends envied their love. Family members pointed to them as an example. "Look at Omar and Layla," his aunties would say during family gatherings. "This is how marriage should be, full of respect, joy, and peace." And Layla would smile shyly, grateful that her marriage was as admired as it was cherished. But beneath the polished surface, there was a quiet sorrow neither of them could ignore. After years of marriage, their home echoed with silence, where the laughter of children should have been. Layla felt it most on Fridays after Jumu'ah, when neighbors' children ran around in excitement, playing with balloons and sweets. Mothers gathered in circles, swapping stories about their babies' first steps or school reports. Layla would join with a polite smile, but her arms felt unbearably empty. In their bedroom at night, she would sometimes curl against Omar and whisper, "Do you think Allah will bless us soon?" His hand would stroke her hair gently, his voice calm. "Inshallah, Layla. Children come when Allah wills it. Don't burden your heart." She would nod, but the ache remained, sitting heavy inside her chest. It wasn't as though they hadn't tried. Layla had visited doctors, endured endless scans, swallowed bitter herbs from well-meaning relatives, and spent long nights in prayer. Omar had been supportive at first, accompanying her to appointments, reassuring her whenever the results came inconclusive. But as months turned to years, his reassurance turned into silence, and silence into distance. He never stopped being kind, but she noticed when his eyes lingered a little too long on neighbors' children, when he came home quieter than before, or when he shifted uncomfortably whenever his mother called. Omar's mother was the storm Layla could never escape. A stern woman with sharp eyes and a tongue that spared no one. She was proud of her son's achievements, but obsessed with legacy. "5 years, Omar," she would say during visits, her voice laced with disapproval. 5 years, and not even a single child to show. What kind of marriage is this? Do you want people to laugh at us? Layla would lower her gaze, her cheeks burning with shame, while Omar tried to defend her. "Mama, these things take time. It is not in our hands." But his mother would snort. "Don't make excuses for her. A woman's duty is to give her husband children. If she cannot, then what is she doing here?" Those words cut Layla deeper than a knife. She never showed it to Omar, but when she was alone, tears soaked her pillow. She was educated. She had a degree in economics. She had once dreamed of starting her own business. But in their culture, all of that meant nothing if a woman couldn't conceive. She wasn't Layla the intelligent graduate, or Layla the devoted wife. She was Layla the barren woman. Even though doctors had confirmed that Omar himself had some fertility issues, no one in the family wanted to hear it. In their eyes, it was always the woman's fault. At night, when the lights were off, Layla would whisper into the dark, "Ya Allah, am I not enough? Why am I being punished? She prayed until her knees ached, fasted outside Ramadan, gave charity secretly, all in hope that Allah would ease her pain. Yet the silence of her home remained. The emptiness in her womb mirrored the emptiness in her heart. Still, she fought to keep her marriage strong. She never blamed Omar, never raised her voice at him. She continued cooking his favorite meals, grilled suya on weekends, spicy egusi soup with pounded yam, his guilty pleasure. She laughed at his jokes, pressed his clothes neatly, and made their home a sanctuary. Whenever he seemed weighed down by family pressure, she would tell him softly, "Don't listen to them. We are enough for each other." He would smile sometimes, but the smile didn't always reach his eyes. One evening, as the rain drummed heavily against the roof, Layla stood by the window watching children splash in the puddles outside. Her heart twisted painfully. Omar came behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Why do you punish yourself by watching them?" he asked gently. She leaned against him, tears threatening to fall. "Because I want what their mothers have." He kissed her cheek, whispering, "You are more than enough for me. I married you, not your womb." The words soothed her for a moment, but deep inside, a part of her wondered if he truly meant them. In public, they continued to shine. At weddings, they danced together, their laughter echoing above the music. At family gatherings, they arrived hand in hand, dressed in matching outfits that drew admiration. Omar bought her gifts, ankle bracelets, gold earrings, perfumes that lingered in the air long after she left a room. People envied her, whispered that she was lucky, and in many ways she was. But Layla knew the truth. Her luck was fragile, resting on a secret pain that no gift could erase. Every anniversary, Omar would surprise her. On their 5th anniversary, he took her to Abuja, where they stayed in a luxury hotel overlooking the city lights. He toasted her with sparkling juice and said, 5 years, and I would still choose you every single time. Layla smiled, touched, but in her heart she wished he had also said, 5 years, and one day, we will hold our child together. That was the sentence she longed for but never heard. By the 5th year of their marriage, the whispers from family turned into open conversations. Relatives pulled Omar aside during events, suggesting second wives, hinting at alternatives. "You're still young," one uncle told him. "Don't waste your years. Legacy is everything." Layla pretended not to hear, but every word was an arrow piercing her chest. She began to notice Omar's silences more, the way he avoided her gaze when family talked about children. It terrified her. She feared losing him, not because she doubted his love, but because she doubted her worth in a society that judged women by their ability to conceive. Yet, despite everything, she held on to their happy beginning. She replayed memories like old songs, his smile at their wedding, his laughter as they cooked together, his voice calling her "my queen" during moments of intimacy. She clung to them like lifelines, believing that as long as their love remained, nothing could destroy them. For Layla, their story was still beautiful, even if it was imperfect. She still believed love could conquer all, but she had no idea that cracks were already forming beneath the surface, that her cousin's arrival would soon test every vow they had made, and that her happy beginning was only a fragile prelude to the storm waiting ahead. Layla woke up one morning to the faint sound of voices in the living room. The smell of fried akara and pap wafted into the bedroom. She stretched her arms lazily, thinking Omar had perhaps woken up earlier to surprise her with breakfast. But as she sat up, she realized the voices weren't Omar's. They were hushed, low, and sharp in tone, the voice of Omar's mother and her sister-in-law Miriam. Layla's heart tightened. She wrapped her scarf quickly around her head and stepped quietly into the hallway. She paused at the corner, listening. "Miriam, do you see how disgraceful this is?" his mother was saying, her words slicing the air. 5 years. 5 whole years, and not a single child to show for it. When people ask me about my grandchildren, what do I tell them? That Omar married a woman who cannot give him children. Miriam gasped dramatically. "Wallahi, Mama, I don't know how she even sleeps at night. If it were me, I would pack my bags myself and free the man." Layla froze. Shame flooded her body, like boiling water. She wanted to walk into the room and defend herself, to shout that she was not the only problem, that Omar's test results showed he also struggled. But she stayed silent. She knew if she spoke, they would twist her words and use them against her. Instead, she turned around, her steps soundless, and returned to her room. She closed the door gently, leaning against it as tears slid down her cheeks. She wasn't new to such whispers, but hearing them in her own home felt like a betrayal. This was supposed to be her sanctuary, yet the very walls now echoed with judgment. When Omar returned that evening, she tried to bring it up. He was seated on the couch, scrolling through his phone, when she sat beside him. "Omar," she began softly, "your mother, she doesn't hide how she feels about me anymore." He sighed, dropping the phone on the table. "Layla, you know how Mama is. She speaks without filter. Don't let her words get to you." She looked at him, her eyes wide with pain. "But they do get to me. Every time she speaks, she tears me down. She makes me feel like I'm failing you, like I don't deserve to be your wife." Omar pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You are my wife. That is what matters. Let them say what they want." She wanted to believe him, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of weariness. He was tired of defending her, tired of hearing the same questions from relatives, tired of a battle with no end. The pressure didn't stop there. At every family gathering, the whispers grew louder. At a cousin's wedding, Layla overheard two aunties talking as they adjusted their geli. 5 years, and she still hasn't given him a child. Omar should marry again before it's too late. Another replied, "Maybe he already has someone in mind. These men don't wait forever." Layla smiled politely when they turned to greet her, but inside her heart screamed. She couldn't escape it. The community measured her worth in children, and she had none. She began to withdraw, avoiding gatherings whenever possible. She made excuses to stay home, preferring the silence of her living room to the poisoned whispers of relatives. But even at home, the silence wasn't kind. Every corner of their house reminded her of what was missing. The nursery room they had once painted in hopeful anticipation remained empty, its walls mocking her. The crib Omar had bought just in case gathered dust. Every prayer mat reminded her of unanswered supplications. One evening, after another exhausting day of forced smiles, Layla confronted Omar. "Do you ever wish you had married someone else?" she asked suddenly as they sat at the dinner table. Omar looked up from his plate, startled. "Why would you ask me that?" She dropped her spoon, tears brimming in her eyes. "Because everyone else wishes it for you. Because they make me feel like I'm holding you back from having a real family." Omar reached across the table, taking her hand. "Stop listening to them, Layla. I chose you. You are my family." But his words, though sincere, couldn't silence the doubts gnawing at her soul. Did he really mean it? Or was he only saying what a husband was supposed to say? Layla decided to revisit the doctor, desperate for answers. She went alone, sitting in the sterile white room, with her heart pounding. The doctor, a kind middle-aged man, flipped through her file and gave her a small smile. "Layla, from the tests we've run, you are fine. Your body can conceive. The challenge lies more with Omar's results. His sperm count is significantly low." Layla's chest tightened. She had known this, but hearing it again stirred a mix of relief and sorrow. Relief that she wasn't the only issue. Sorrow that no one would ever believe her. She couldn't bring herself to confront Omar with the results again. The first time had ended in silence and avoidance. He had brushed it aside, insisting they should keep trying, insisting she shouldn't tell anyone. It was their secret, but it left her carrying the weight of shame alone. When she returned home, she found Omar in the living room, watching football with a glass of juice. She sat beside him quietly, studying his profile. He looked calm, absorbed in the match. For a moment, she envied his ability to detach from the storm that consumed her. She wanted to scream, to tell him how suffocated she felt, but instead, she leaned against him silently. He wrapped an arm around her, not realizing her silence was heavier than words. Weeks passed, but the whispers only grew louder. Omar's mother visited often, each time bringing new suggestions. "There's a young girl in our neighborhood," she told him one afternoon while Layla was in the kitchen. "She is healthy, strong, from a good family. Why don't you marry her as a second wife? No one will blame you. In fact, people will respect you more. Layla froze as she stirred the pot of soup, her ears burning. She wanted to storm into the living room and shout, "Why don't you tell her the truth? Why don't you tell her you are the reason we have no children?" But she stayed rooted in place, her knuckles white around the wooden spoon. Omar's reply was calm but firm. "Mama, I am not marrying another woman. Layla is my wife." His mother scoffed loudly. "Love doesn't build legacies, Omar. Children do. You are blinded by feelings, but one day you will regret wasting your youth on her." That night, Layla couldn't sleep. She turned on her side, staring at Omar as he slept peacefully. She wondered how long he could keep defending her. How long before the pressure broke him too? The doubts began to seep into Layla's own thoughts. She found herself questioning her worth, questioning her future. Was she enough? Could love alone sustain a marriage built under such relentless scrutiny? She began to feel invisible, reduced to nothing more than a womb that refused to cooperate. In her quietest moments, she thought about leaving, about setting Omar free from the burden of defending her. But the thought of living without him was unbearable. She loved him too deeply, even when love itself felt like it was crumbling under the weight of expectation. One Saturday morning, as they prepared for another family event, Layla hesitated while tying her geli. "Omar," she whispered, what if you did take another wife?" He turned to her, shock etched on his face. "What are you saying?" She forced a bitter smile. "Maybe it would ease the pressure. Maybe it would make them stop looking at me like I'm cursed." Omar dropped his cap, striding toward her. "Never say that again. Do you hear me? You are my wife. I don't care what anyone says. I don't care what Mama wants. I care about you." His words made her chest tighten with love, but still, a voice inside whispered, "For how long?" Layla buried her fears beneath a mask of composure, but the whispers continued to echo in her mind long after the voices stopped. They seeped into her prayers, her dreams, her very sense of self. She had started her marriage in joy, but now she walked under the heavy shadow of doubt. And in that shadow, something dangerous was beginning to grow. Not just in her, but in Omar too. It was the first week of Ramadan when Layla's cousin Hannah arrived. The timing seemed almost symbolic to Layla. A holy month, a month of prayer and mercy, a month of renewed hope. Perhaps having Hannah around would ease the heaviness in her home. At least that's what she told herself when she agreed to host her cousin, though her heart felt strangely unsettled when Omar's mother suggested it. Hannah is young, responsible, and she's been looking for a place to stay while she interns in the city, the older woman had said. It would be good company for Layla. Layla nodded politely, though she wondered why her mother-in-law suddenly cared about her company. She didn't argue, because in their culture refusing could be interpreted as hostility, and the last thing she needed was more gossip about being difficult. So Hannah came. Hannah was 23, stunning in a way that drew attention everywhere she went. Her skin was smooth and rich-toned, her eyes bright with mischief, her laughter musical and confident. She had always been the cousin everyone admired at family functions, the one who dressed the best, danced the longest, and carried herself like she owned the room. Layla had grown up with her, seen that streak of ambition in her since childhood. Hannah loved the spotlight, and she wasn't shy about getting it. When she walked into Layla's home that day with her suitcase in one hand and her phone in the other, she wore a fitted abaya that accentuated her slim figure, her braids swinging stylishly down her back. "Sister Layla," she exclaimed, wrapping her in a tight hug. "I've missed you." Layla smiled warmly, even as something inside her stirred uneasily. "You're welcome, Hannah. This is your home too." Omar entered the living room just then, dressed in a simple kaftan after returning from mosque. Hannah's eyes lit up as she greeted him, her voice dripping with charm. "Brother Omar, it's been too long. You haven't aged a day." Omar chuckled politely. "Welcome, Hannah. How was the journey?" She launched into an animated story about the bus ride, about the heat and the delays, her hands gesturing dramatically. Omar listened with a small smile, occasionally nodding. Layla watched silently, noticing the way Hannah positioned herself, the way she leaned just a little too close, the way her laughter lingered longer than necessary. Layla brushed it off. She told herself it was just Hannah's personality, outgoing, playful, dramatic. But still, the unease remained. In the following weeks, Hannah settled into the household. She was helpful, yes, offering to cook, clean, and even accompany Layla to the market. But she also had a way of inserting herself into every conversation, every moment. When Omar returned from work, Hannah was always the first to greet him, her smile radiant, her voice sweet. "Brother Omar, you must be tired. Should I bring you juice?" she would ask, before Layla could even rise. When Omar spoke about his day, Hannah listened with an attentiveness that seemed exaggerated, her eyes locked on his face, her laughter loudest at his jokes. Layla noticed. She noticed everything, but she said nothing. One evening, after iftar, the three of them sat in the living room. The lights were dim, the fan spinning lazily above them. Hannah wore a soft chiffon hijab and a long gown that clung just enough to reveal her curves. She sat cross-legged on the couch, sipping kunu, her eyes glinting in the light. Omar was explaining a business deal he had just closed, his voice animated. Hannah leaned forward, her chin resting on her hand, her eyes wide with admiration. "You're so intelligent, Brother Omar," she said softly. "No wonder everyone respects you. You must be the pride of the family." Omar laughed modestly, shaking his head. "It's just hard work, Hannah." Layla forced a smile, but inside her stomach churned. She excused herself, retreating to the kitchen under the pretense of washing dishes, though her hands trembled as she scrubbed plates that were already clean. Later that night, when they were alone, she turned to Omar. "Hannah seems very taken with you." Omar looked at her in surprise. "Taken with me? She's just being polite, Layla. Don't overthink it." Layla lowered her gaze. "It doesn't feel like politeness. It feels like more." Omar sighed, pulling her close. "You're imagining things. Hannah is family. Don't let insecurities cloud your mind." She nodded, though the unease lingered like a shadow that refused to fade. Over the weeks, the atmosphere in the house began to shift subtly. Hannah was everywhere. If Omar wanted tea, Hannah was already in the kitchen brewing it. If Omar discussed football, Hannah was quick to join in, laughing at his banter, asking clever questions. If Layla tried to engage her husband in conversation, Hannah often interrupted with stories of her internship, her friends, her ambitions. Omar seemed amused, entertained even. Layla felt increasingly invisible in her own home. She tried to dismiss it, tried to focus on her prayers, her fasts, her private supplications. But she couldn't ignore the way Hannah's presence filled every corner. One afternoon, while folding laundry, Layla overheard Hannah on the phone in her room. The door was ajar, and Hannah's voice floated into the hallway. "Yes, he's amazing. Honestly, I don't know how Sister Layla got so lucky. He deserves so much more, don't you think? He's too good for a life without children. Any woman would be blessed to carry his child." Layla froze, the folded wrapper slipping from her hands. Her heart raced, fury burning in her chest. She wanted to burst in, to confront Hannah, to demand what she meant. But instead, she stepped back quietly, tears stinging her eyes. She returned to her room, her body trembling. For the first time, she wondered if Hannah's arrival hadn't been a coincidence at all. Maybe it had been orchestrated. Maybe her mother-in-law knew exactly what she was doing. That evening, she confronted Omar again. "Do you ever notice the way Hannah speaks to you? The way she looks at you?" He frowned, irritation flickering across his face. "Layla, I've told you before, you're imagining things. Hannah is like a younger sister. Stop making problems where there are none." His tone was sharper than usual, and it cut her. She turned away, swallowing her tears. "I just don't want to lose you," she whispered. He softened then, reaching for her hand. "You won't lose me. I promise." But the promise felt hollow, echoing in the growing space between them. Hannah, for her part, became bolder. She began dressing more provocatively at home, claiming comfort as her excuse. Her laughter grew louder, her compliments more frequent. Layla noticed the way Omar's eyes occasionally flickered toward her cousin when he thought no one was watching. It was quick, subtle, but Layla saw. She saw everything, and it broke her. One night, unable to bear the tension, Layla knelt on her prayer mat long after everyone else had gone to bed. Her tears wet the fabric as she begged Allah for strength. Ya Allah, protect my home. Protect my marriage. Keep temptation far from us. Grant me patience. But deep in her heart, a new fear was blooming, a fear that her prayers might already be too late. The change was gradual, so gradual that at first Layla told herself she was only being paranoid. Hannah's laughter lingered longer, Omar's silences stretched further, and the conversations in the house had shifted. It was no longer Omar and Layla. Now Hannah was always there, inserting herself into every exchange, weaving herself into the very fabric of their daily lives. Layla told herself she was imagining things because to admit the truth was to admit that her worst fear was happening under her own roof. But the truth was undeniable. Something had shifted between Omar and Hannah. It began with harmless-seeming moments. Omar came home one evening from work, loosening his tie as he stepped into the living room. Hannah was already there, lounging on the couch in a fitted gown that did little to hide her curves. She rose quickly, her smile wide. "Brother Omar, welcome," she said, moving toward him with a glass of juice before Layla could even stand. "You must be exhausted." Omar chuckled, surprised but appreciative. "Thank you, Hannah. You didn't have to." She laughed lightly, brushing off the compliment. Layla, sitting at the dining table, felt invisible. She kept her eyes fixed on the plate of beans she was eating, though her ears picked up every word, every tone, every shift in atmosphere. As weeks passed, the little acts multiplied. If Omar needed something ironed, Hannah was already at the ironing board. If he complained about the heat, Hannah fetched a hand fan and playfully waved it at him, teasing about being his personal assistant. Omar laughed at her jokes, and though he never encouraged her beyond that, Layla noticed how relaxed he seemed around her. It was a relaxation that wounded her because it was a reminder that he no longer seemed that lighthearted around her. Layla's love was deep, but it was weighed down by pain, by the constant whispers of infertility. Hannah, on the other hand, was carefree, lively, and unburdened. And Omar, a man under pressure, found comfort in that. One night after tearaway prayers, Layla went to bed early, her body aching from fasting and housework. Omar remained in the living room, his Quran on the table beside him. Hannah was still awake, claiming she was studying for her internship. Layla stirred briefly in her sleep and noticed the dim glow of the living room lights. She almost went to tell them both to rest, but decided against it. In the morning, she woke to find Omar already dressed for work, sipping tea while Hannah laughed at something on her phone. "You two slept late," Layla said carefully. Omar shrugged. "We were just talking." Hannah's eyes glinted mischievously, and Layla's stomach twisted. The conversations between Omar and Hannah grew longer, stretching into hours. Layla would pass by and hear Hannah giggling softly. Her voice hushed, as Omar responded with low tones. Once, she caught them sitting close on the couch, their heads bent together over Omar's phone as he explained something to her. Hannah's hand brushed his arm as she laughed, and though Omar pulled away slightly, Layla saw the flicker of something in his eyes, an unspoken spark that terrified her. Her suspicions solidified one evening when she returned home early from the market. The house was unusually quiet. She placed the bags of vegetables on the counter and walked toward the living room. There, she saw Hannah, sitting very close to Omar, her hand lightly resting on his thigh as she whispered something into his ear. Omar looked startled, shifting uncomfortably, but he didn't immediately push her away. Layla's gasp broke the moment. Both their heads snapped up, eyes wide with guilt. Hannah quickly withdrew her hand, feigning innocence. "Oh, Sister Layla, you're back already." Layla's heart pounded, her throat tight. She turned away, her hands trembling. That night, she didn't confront Omar. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, tears silently streaming down her face. The seed of betrayal had been planted, and she felt it growing, suffocating her. It didn't take long before the seed bloomed into something undeniable. One rainy night, after Layla had retired early due to a pounding headache, Omar remained in the living room again. The sound of rain masked the soft footsteps, the muted whispers, the creak of the couch as Hannah, sat too close. Layla stirred restlessly in her sleep, but exhaustion kept her still. In the living room, temptation overcame restraint. Hannah leaned in, her hand grazing Omar's cheek as she whispered, "You deserve more than just waiting, Brother Omar. You deserve happiness. You deserve children." Her words pierced through his defenses, echoing the doubts already haunting him. He had tried to be strong, tried to resist, but the pressure from his mother, the whispers from relatives, the silent emptiness of his home, it all crashed down in that moment. And in a moment of weakness, Omar gave in. What began as comfort turned into something physical, something dangerous. The first kiss was hesitant, almost accidental. But once the line was crossed, it became easier to cross again. Nights that should have been filled with Layla's companionship were stolen by Hannah's bold advances. Their affair grew in secret, hidden behind the walls of the house, where Layla prayed for peace, unaware that her sanctuary had become a place of betrayal. Yet Layla wasn't completely blind. She noticed the subtle changes. Omar's sudden avoidance of her gaze, the way he flinched when she touched him, the guilty heaviness in his voice when he told her, "I love you." She noticed Hannah's smug glances, the way her cousin walked with a new air of triumph, as though she held a secret that gave her power. Layla's heart ached, but she forced herself into silence. She had no proof yet, only suspicions, and she knew confronting Omar without evidence would only drive him further away. One evening, while preparing dinner, Layla overheard another hushed conversation between Omar and Hannah. She stood frozen by the kitchen doorway, her breath caught in her throat. Hannah's voice was low, sultry. "What if she finds out?" Omar's reply was tense. "She won't. We can't let her know." Layla's world shattered with those words. The tears she had held back for weeks finally broke free, streaming down her cheeks as she clutched the counter for support. She realized then that her fears were not paranoia, they were reality. Her husband, the man she had loved and defended, had betrayed her with her own cousin. That night, as she lay in bed beside Omar, she kept her back turned to him, her body stiff. He reached for her, but she pretended to be asleep. Inside, her heart was a storm, but her face remained calm. She knew the truth now, and though it destroyed her, she resolved to keep silent until the time was right. For Layla, silence was no longer weakness. It was preparation. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, casting warm streaks across the room. Layla lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying the hushed voices she had overheard. She had proof now, maybe not written or recorded, but enough for her heart to accept what her eyes and ears had confirmed. Omar had betrayed her, and Hannah was no longer just a guest in her home. She was a rival who had crossed boundaries no family member should dare cross. Still, Layla said nothing. Silence, she realized, was her armor. If she erupted in anger, if she confronted Omar without strategy, she would be painted as the hysterical, jealous wife, while Hannah would slip easily into the role of the calm, misunderstood cousin. Layla couldn't give them that satisfaction. She would wait, she would watch, and she would endure. But silence didn't ease the ache in her chest. Days turned into weeks, and the atmosphere in the house thickened. Omar avoided her eyes more often. Hannah moved with a smug confidence that made Layla's stomach churn. Yet she continued her duties, cooking, cleaning, and smiling politely when necessary. If they thought she would crumble, they were wrong. She carried herself with grace, though inside she was breaking. The cruel truth unveiled itself one evening in the most devastating way. Layla had been feeling unwell, her body weak and heavy with fatigue. She had decided to rest early, but as she passed the living room, she heard voices, Omar's and Hannah's, low but urgent. She paused, her heart thudding, and leaned against the wall, straining to listen. "Omar, I'm late," Hannah whispered, her tone trembling with both fear and triumph. "I think I'm pregnant." Layla's breath caught in her throat. Her body went rigid, her blood rushing so loudly in her ears she thought she might collapse. She pressed a hand to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Pregnant. The word echoed in her head like a cruel drumbeat. Hannah was carrying a child, and everyone would believe it was Omar's. Inside the room, Omar was silent for a long moment. Then he exhaled sharply, his voice strained. "Are you sure?" "Yes," Hannah said firmly. "I've missed my period. I tested this morning. It's positive." Layla staggered backward, her hand gripping the wall for support. She wanted to scream, to storm into the room and demand answers, but her voice was trapped in her throat. Instead, she retreated quietly, her body trembling uncontrollably. She locked herself in her room and collapsed on the floor, sobs tearing through her chest. All the prayers, all the nights spent begging Allah for a child, and yet it was Hannah, the betrayer, who was carrying life. It was too cruel, too bitter to comprehend. When Omar entered the bedroom later, Layla feigned sleep. He sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, sighing heavily. She could feel the tension radiating from him, the weight of his guilt and fear. But he said nothing. In the morning, she watched as he moved through the house distractedly, his face clouded. Hannah, meanwhile, glowed with a smug radiance, her hand resting on her stomach, as though cradling a prize. Layla's heart broke a little more with every passing second. The news spread quickly, though Layla herself had said nothing. Omar's mother visited one afternoon, her eyes gleaming with triumph as she embraced Hannah. "Mashallah! Finally, Allah has remembered this family," she exclaimed, her voice loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "This is the blessing we've been waiting for. Omar, you will have a child at last." She turned to Layla then, her eyes sharp with cruel satisfaction. "You see, this is how a real woman proves her worth." Layla lowered her gaze, her lips pressed tightly together, swallowing the scream rising in her chest. No one cared that Hannah was her cousin. No one cared that betrayal had shattered her home. All they cared about was the child, a child they believed would restore the family's honor. The family threw a small celebration, inviting close relatives to congratulate Omar and Hannah. Layla watched from the corner of the room, her face expressionless as people danced, laughed, and offered prayers. Her aunties clapped Hannah on the back, calling her the savior of the bloodline. They praised Omar for his strength, for his proven virility. And when they looked at Layla, it was with thinly veiled pity or outright scorn. She sat silently, her hands clenched in her lap, every laugh, every cheer slicing into her heart like a blade. She wanted to stand up and shout the truth, that Omar had been diagnosed with infertility, that Hannah's child could not possibly be his. But she held her tongue. Not yet. Timing was everything. If she revealed it now, they would call her bitter, jealous, desperate. She needed more than truth. She needed proof. So she waited. That night, after the celebration, Omar found her in their room, sitting quietly on the bed. He sat beside her, his head in his hands. "Layla," he whispered, his voice breaking. She didn't look at him. "What do you want me to say, Omar? Congratulations? Or should I thank you for humiliating me in front of the whole family?" His shoulders sagged, his silence louder than words. Finally, he whispered, "I didn't plan this. It just happened." She turned to him then, her eyes burning with fury. "It just happened. With my cousin Omar? Under my roof? You didn't plan it, but you let it happen. And now she carries what you and I prayed for. Do you know what that does to me?" Tears filled his eyes, but he didn't defend himself. He couldn't. The guilt was carved into his very face. Layla turned away from him, her voice cold. "You destroyed me, Omar. And the worst part is, everyone will celebrate you for it." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. That night, they slept on opposite sides of the bed, the chasm between them wider than ever before. As the weeks passed, Hannah's pregnancy became the center of attention. The family visited frequently, showering her with gifts, praising her resilience, calling her blessed. Layla endured it all silently, her smile fixed, but her heart in ruins. Omar moved through the days like a man trapped, his eyes shadowed, his voice heavy with regret. But the world outside didn't see his torment. They only saw his supposed triumph. Layla was the only one who saw the truth, and she clung to it like a weapon she wasn't ready to use. Her breaking point came one afternoon when she overheard Hannah speaking to a group of relatives. "Allah truly chooses who he blesses," Hannah said proudly, her hand on her growing belly. "Some women may pray and pray, but if it isn't written for them, it will never happen. Maybe some of us were simply not meant to be mothers. The women around her laughed knowingly, casting sideways glances at Layla. Layla's chest tightened, her nails digging into her palms until they bled. She excused herself quietly and retreated to her room, her body shaking. That day, she made a decision. She could no longer remain in the shadows of her humiliation. She would leave, she would vanish, and she would rebuild herself far from their poisonous whispers. But she would not disappear broken. No, she would return one day, stronger, and when she did, the cruel truth would no longer be her burden. It would be Omar's and Hannah's downfall. The morning after Hannah's boastful words about motherhood, Layla woke with a new resolve burning in her chest. The pain of betrayal still weighed on her, but it no longer paralyzed her. It had transformed into something sharper, something that gave her strength. She realized that if she stayed, the humiliation would only deepen. Her mother-in-law would mock her endlessly. Hannah would flaunt her belly with pride, and Omar, whether regretful or not, had already broken their vows. The only way to reclaim herself was to walk away, to retreat into silence and rebuild what had been shattered. So, quietly, she began to plan her escape. She didn't tell Omar. She didn't confront Hannah. She carried on as though nothing had changed, fulfilling her duties with the same grace and calm she had always shown. She cooked meals, greeted guests, and even smiled when relatives praised Hannah. But behind her calm eyes, her mind worked tirelessly. She sold her jewelry piece by piece, visiting a trusted jeweler in the market who never asked questions. With every sale, she tucked the money away into a secret purse hidden beneath her clothes in the wardrobe. She began gathering documents too, her certificates, her passport, everything she would need to start a new life. Each night, while Omar snored beside her, she folded her plans tighter, waiting for the right moment to disappear. Her resolve was tested constantly. Hannah strutted around the house like a queen, rubbing her belly as if the child inside were a trophy. "Brother Omar, do you want more pepper in your soup?" she would ask, her tone syrupy sweet. Omar's answers were always short, weighed with guilt, but Hannah never seemed to care. She was winning, and she knew it. Omar's mother visited almost daily, showering Hannah with gifts and praises while ignoring Layla completely. "Allah has chosen the right womb for our family," she said one afternoon, kissing Hannah's forehead. Layla stood quietly in the background, her face serene, though inside her soul screamed. She no longer allowed herself to cry. Tears had no use now. She needed clarity, not pity. Omar tried, in his own weak way, to bridge the chasm between them. One night, he sat beside Layla in their room, his voice low and pleading. "Layla, I know I've hurt you. I don't expect forgiveness, but please don't leave me." She turned her face toward him, her eyes unreadable. "Leave you? Where would I go?" Her voice was calm, controlled. He reached for her hand, but she gently withdrew. "Sleep, Omar. Tomorrow is another day." He sighed heavily, defeated, and turned away. Layla lay awake long after, her heart pounding with the knowledge that she was indeed leaving, but not in anger, not in haste. She would leave with dignity, quietly, without a single word. That would be her power. Her opportunity came sooner than she expected. A cousin from Lagos called one afternoon, offering her a chance to join a women's cooperative in the city. They were helping women start businesses, providing small loans and training in fashion design, catering, and trading. Layla's heart leapt at the chance. She had always dreamed of starting her own business, and now Allah was opening a door where one had been closed. "Can you come soon?" her cousin asked over the phone. Layla hesitated, glancing toward the living room where Hannah laughed loudly at something on TV. Then she whispered, "Yes, very soon." She ended the call, her chest tight with both fear and hope. The plan was no longer a distant thought. It was real. She chose a Thursday morning to leave. Omar had gone to work early, and Hannah was still asleep. Layla packed a single suitcase with her clothes, her documents, and the money she had saved. She looked around the bedroom one last time, her eyes lingering on the prayer mats they had once shared, the framed wedding photo on the wall where they both smiled with innocent joy. Her heart ached, but she forced herself to look away. She walked through the house, pausing briefly at the nursery room that had never been used. Dust clung to the crib, the walls still painted in soft yellow. She whispered a silent prayer, "Ya Allah, give me strength," and closed the door behind her. Without a single word to Hannah, she left the house, her footsteps firm, her scarf pulled low over her face. The bus ride to Lagos was long and bumpy, but Layla felt lighter with every mile. For the first time in years, she wasn't suffocating under judgmental stares or cruel whispers. She was anonymous, free, a woman on a journey to reclaim herself. She arrived at her cousin's modest apartment late in the evening, exhausted but relieved. Her cousin, Fatima, welcomed her warmly. "You are safe here, Layla. Whatever happened, you will rise again." Layla hugged her tightly, her tears finally breaking free. "I don't know where to start," she whispered. Fatima smiled gently. "Start with yourself. That is enough." In the weeks that followed, Layla threw herself into the cooperative. She learned sewing, designing beautiful dresses with intricate embroidery. She learned to bake pastries that melted in the mouth, to calculate profits and reinvest wisely. For the first time in years, she wasn't defined by her womb. She was defined by her skills, her determination, her resilience. The women around her became her sisters, each with their own story of pain and triumph. Some were widows, some divorced, some abandoned. Together, they lifted each other, reminding one another that a woman's worth was more than her ability to bear children. Layla flourished among them, her confidence returning like a flower blooming after a harsh drought. Back in Kano, Omar and Hannah faced their own storm. Omar's guilt consumed him. Hannah's pregnancy, once a source of pride, grew complicated. She began to demand more from Omar, flaunting her belly as though it were a weapon. Omar's mother continued her praises, but Omar himself was restless, distracted, haunted by the absence of Layla. He searched for her quietly, calling relatives, asking questions, but Layla had left no trace. Her silence was complete, her retreat flawless. To the family, it looked as though she had accepted defeat and vanished in shame. But Layla knew better. She hadn't disappeared in disgrace. She had withdrawn to rebuild, to rise again. Months passed, and Layla's efforts bore fruit. Her dresses began to attract attention. Her pastries sold quickly at markets, and soon she saved enough to rent her own small shop. She named it Nur by Layla, Light by Layla, because it represented the light she had found within herself after walking through darkness. Customers admired her work, praised her talent, and spread her name. She became known not as the barren wife, not as the disgraced woman, but as a skilled entrepreneur, a woman of substance. And though she missed Omar sometimes, the pain was dulled by her newfound strength. She realized she didn't need his love to survive. She didn't need anyone's approval. She was enough. Her silent retreat wasn't just an escape, it was a rebirth. While Omar and Hannah built their lives on lies and betrayal, Layla built hers on resilience and truth. And though she had no immediate plan to return, she knew that one day, the time would come. One day, she would face them again, not as the broken woman they had humiliated, but as a woman who had turned her pain into power. And when that day came, the silence she carried would roar louder than any words. Layla's life in Lagos blossomed with every passing month. She poured her heart into Nur by Layla, working tirelessly from morning till evening. Her dresses became sought after, not just for their beauty, but for the confidence they gave the women who wore them. She stitched with care, pouring strength into every fabric, resilience into every seam. Her pastries sold out daily, customers lining up outside her shop to taste her meat pies and fluffy chin-chin. Slowly, she was no longer the Layla defined by her husband's betrayal. She was Layla the businesswoman, Layla the survivor, Layla the light. And though she smiled again, deep in her chest a fire still burned, the fire of revenge. She didn't plan revenge immediately. At first, she only wanted to heal, to find herself again. But news traveled quickly even across cities. Relatives who visited Lagos brought stories of Omar and Hannah. They told her how Hannah's pregnancy had been celebrated like a miracle, how Omar's mother paraded her grandchild-to-be with pride. They told her of Hannah's arrogance, of how she now referred to herself as Omar's true wife, implying that Layla had been just a placeholder. Each story fueled Layla's resolve. She could live without Omar, but she would not allow them to destroy her name. One day, she promised herself, she would return, and she would return with truth so undeniable it would crush them. Her opportunity came when a friend of hers, Amina, who worked as a nurse in Kano, visited Lagos. They shared tea one afternoon as Amina leaned in, her eyes wide. "Layla, do you know something strange? Hannah has been coming to the clinic for checkups, but there is something odd. The timing of her pregnancy doesn't add up with what she claims." Layla frowned, her interest piqued. "What do you mean?" Amina hesitated before whispering. "From her reports, it seems she was already pregnant before she even came to stay with you and Omar. I'm almost certain the child isn't his." Layla's heart stopped. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Then the fire inside her roared into an inferno. Not only had they betrayed her, but they had built their victory on a lie so fragile it could collapse with one push. This was the weapon she had prayed for, the undeniable proof that would expose them. Layla didn't rush. She spent weeks gathering evidence. With Amina's discreet help, she obtained copies of Hannah's medical reports, dates that contradicted the family story. She contacted the doctor who had once diagnosed Omar with infertility, asking for written confirmation of his condition. He agreed, moved by her story. Piece by piece, she assembled her arsenal until she held in her hands the truth that would destroy Omar and Hannah's carefully woven lie. She knew she couldn't just confront them quietly. No, the exposure had to be public, undeniable, humiliating. They had shamed her publicly, so she would return their shame in kind. The perfect opportunity came when Omar's younger sister was set to marry. The entire family would gather, the hall filled with relatives, neighbors, and friends. Invitations spread quickly, and Layla received one too, delivered by a cousin who looked surprised to find her thriving in Lagos. Layla smiled as she accepted it. "Tell them I will be there," she said calmly. The cousin blinked, curious, but said nothing. Layla returned to her shop that evening, her heart pounding with anticipation. The time had come. On the day of the wedding, Layla dressed with deliberate care. She wore a flowing Ankara gown of royal blue and gold, her gilly wrapped high and regal. Her skin glowed, her smile radiant. When she walked into the hall, conversation stopped. Guests stared, some whispering, some gaping openly. Many had assumed she had vanished in disgrace, living somewhere in shame. Yet here she was, more beautiful, more powerful, more alive than ever. Heads turned as she walked with quiet confidence, her steps steady, her eyes forward. She could feel Hannah's glare from across the hall, sharp as a knife. Hannah's belly was now round, her body wrapped in a fitted gown that accentuated her pregnancy. She clutched Omar's arm tightly, her smile forced. Omar himself looked stunned, his eyes widening as he saw Layla approach. His lips parted, but no words came out. The ceremony continued, but the atmosphere was tense. Relatives whispered, sneaking glances at Layla. Some were amazed at her transformation, others curious about her return. Omar avoided her gaze, guilt etched in every line of his face. Hannah, however, couldn't contain herself. During the reception, she strutted about proudly, her hand on her belly, receiving congratulations as though she were royalty. Finally, unable to resist, she approached Layla. "Sister Layla," she said sweetly, though her eyes gleamed with malice. "You look well. Lagos seems to have treated you better than Kano ever did." Layla smiled politely, her voice calm. "Indeed it has. Lagos has a way of revealing who we truly are." Hannah stiffened slightly, but quickly recovered, patting her belly. "You came just in time to see the joy Allah has given us. Soon, Omar will be a father, and our family name will continue. Isn't that wonderful?" Layla's smile widened, her eyes steady. It would be wonderful if it were true. The words hung in the air like a spark in dry grass. Nearby relatives leaned in, their ears pricked. Hannah's smile faltered. "What do you mean?" Layla tilted her head, her voice carrying clearly across the small crowd that had gathered. "I mean, everyone here believes you are carrying Omar's child. But the truth is, Omar cannot father children. The doctors confirmed it long ago. and your own medical records show you were already pregnant before you ever stepped foot in our house." A gasp rippled through the hall. All eyes turned to Hannah, whose face drained of color. Omar's mother rose from her seat, her voice sharp. "How dare you? Do you think we will believe your lies?" Layla reached into her bag calmly, pulling out the neatly folded papers. "These are not lies. These are medical reports, signed, stamped, undeniable. If you doubt me, read them aloud." She handed the documents to an uncle standing nearby, a respected elder. He adjusted his glasses and scanned the papers, his expression darkening with every line. Finally, he looked up, his voice heavy. "She speaks the truth." The hall erupted into chaos. Relatives shouted, others murmured in shock. Hannah stammered, her hands trembling as she clutched her belly. "No, this isn't, she's lying." But her voice was drowned out by the uproar. Omar's mother collapsed into her chair, her face pale, her pride shattered. Omar himself stood frozen, his face ashen, his guilt exposed for all to see. Layla, however, remained calm. She stood tall, her voice steady as she addressed the crowd. "You shamed me. You called me barren, cursed, unworthy. You celebrated a lie built on betrayal. But the truth cannot stay hidden forever. Today, the truth has spoken for itself." With that, she turned gracefully and walked away, her head held high, leaving behind a hall drowning in disgrace. For Layla, revenge wasn't about shouting or screaming. It was about truth, delivered at the perfect moment, with precision that left no room for denial. Her silence had been her strength, her patience her weapon. And now, with one strike, she had exposed them completely. The betrayal that once destroyed her had become the very tool of her triumph. The aftermath of the wedding was unlike anything the family had ever seen. The once celebrated union of Omar and Hannah now sat in ruins, shattered by the truth Layla had revealed with such precision. The gossip spread like wildfire through Kano, spilling into neighboring towns and even reaching relatives in Abuja and Lagos. Within days, everyone knew the story. Omar was infertile, Hannah's pregnancy was not his, and the woman they had mocked and discarded had returned stronger than ever to expose them. Layla's name, once whispered in pity, was now spoken with admiration. People said she was a woman of wisdom, a woman of power, a woman who turned humiliation into glory. Omar's world collapsed around him. His mother, once his greatest supporter, now looked at him with disdain. "You hid the truth from me," she demanded one evening, her voice trembling with rage. "You let me shame that girl, call her barren, while you knew it was you all along. Do you know how people laugh at me now?" Omar sat with his head in his hands, unable to meet her eyes. "I didn't want anyone to know," he whispered. I thought maybe things would change." His mother slapped her thigh in fury. "Change? You let your cousin destroy your marriage, your reputation, your name. You are a disgrace, Omar." He wanted to defend himself, but he had no words. Everything his mother said was true. He had destroyed everything with his weakness. Hannah, on the other hand, found herself isolated. Once praised and celebrated, she was now mocked and shunned. Neighbors who had congratulated her now whispered cruelly as she walked past. She thought she was clever. They muttered, "But see how she has disgraced herself." Even her own parents turned cold, ashamed of the scandal. The pregnancy that had once been her weapon was now her curse. She tried to cling to Omar, insisting that they could still raise the child together, but he pushed her away. "Don't touch me," he spat one evening, his face twisted with disgust. "You ruined me. You trapped me. I want nothing to do with you." Hannah wept, but her tears couldn't undo the truth. She had gambled everything and lost. Meanwhile, Layla thrived. Back in Lagos, her shop expanded rapidly. Customers came not just for her designs, but also to see the woman who had risen from betrayal with such dignity. Women brought their daughters to meet her, telling them, "Learn from Layla. Learn that a woman's strength is not in pleasing others, but in knowing her own worth." She became a symbol, her story shared in markets, salons, and even mosques. Nur by Layla opened a second branch, and she began employing other women, giving opportunities to those who had been cast aside, as she once had. Each day she walked into her shop, she felt the weight of her past lift a little more. She no longer needed Omar's love or the family's approval. She had found her own light, but her revenge was not finished. The exposure at the wedding had been powerful, but the final blow came quietly, almost effortlessly. Omar, desperate to salvage his reputation, tried to approach her one afternoon in Lagos. He came to her shop, his once confident demeanor reduced to a shadow. He wore a simple kaftan, his beard unkempt, his eyes hollow. Customers watched curiously as he stood at the entrance, shifting nervously. Layla stepped out, her head held high, her Ankara gown flowing elegantly around her. "Omar," she said coolly, "why are you here?" He swallowed hard, his voice breaking. "Layla, please. I made mistakes. I was weak. I let them pressure me. I betrayed you, and I regret it every day. Please come back. Let us start again." His words drew murmurs from those nearby. Layla's lips curved into a small smile, not of joy, but of triumph. "Come back," she repeated softly. "To what, Omar? To humiliation? To betrayal? You broke our vows with my own blood, my own family. You destroyed me, and you celebrated my pain. And now you come here because you have nothing left? No, Omar. I will not return to ashes when I have built a kingdom." She turned slightly, her voice carrying for all to hear. "My story with you ended the day you chose Hannah over me. Today, I am not your wife. I am Layla, the woman who rose." The crowd clapped softly, some cheering, others nodding with admiration. Omar's shoulders slumped. He knew then that he had lost her forever. The humiliation was complete. Omar left her shop with his head bowed, the whispers of onlookers following him like shadows. By the time he returned to Kano, his reputation was irreparably damaged. Business partners distanced themselves, relatives avoided him, and neighbors mocked him. He had once been admired, respected, envied. Now he was pitted, scorned, and ridiculed. Hannah gave birth months later, but instead of restoring honor, the child only deepened scandal. People looked at the baby and whispered about its true father, speculating, mocking, tearing Hannah's pride apart. She became a recluse, her beauty fading under the weight of shame. Omar, too, withdrew, a broken man haunted by what he had lost. Layla, on the other hand, blossomed like never before. She expanded her business nationwide, her name synonymous with strength and success. She began speaking at women's gatherings, sharing her story to inspire others. "They tried to define me by what I could not give," she would say. "But I chose to define myself by what I could create. I created a life, a business, a future, not from a womb, but from willpower. And that is enough." Her words resonated, stirring hope in countless women who felt trapped by societal expectations. She became more than a businesswoman. She became a movement. Her revenge was complete, but it wasn't fueled by bitterness anymore. It was fueled by justice. She hadn't needed to scream or curse or fight physically. She had used truth, patience, and her own transformation to dismantle the lies built against her. Omar and Hannah were left in ruins, not by her hand directly, but by the very choices they had made. Layla had simply let the truth do its work, and it had destroyed them far more effectively than any rage could have. Years later, when people told her story, they didn't call her the barren wife. They called her the woman who turned betrayal into triumph. They spoke of her as a lesson, a reminder that no one can define another's worth. Mothers taught their daughters to be like Layla. Men warned their sons not to be like Omar. And as for Hannah, her name became a cautionary tale of deceit and arrogance. Layla often stood in her shop at closing time, looking at the glowing sign of Nur by Layla above the door. She would smile to herself, her heart at peace. She had lost her husband, her cousin had betrayed her, and her in-laws had mocked her. But in the end, she had gained herself. And in gaining herself, she had gained everything. That was the final blow, not loud, not dramatic, but lasting. Omar and Hannah were destroyed by their lies, while Layla's truth built her empire. She had walked away, and in walking away, she had won. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please like, comment, and share. Also turn on the bell to get more of our videos. See you in the next story.